about it, but not in very certain terms. India, we say the federal polity, right? We have a federal structure. Why is it a federal structure? What is the meaning of federation, right? Right. So let's understand that. We say India is a federation. Federation in structure. Our structure is such that it is federation. Let us go into the very structure. Federation basically comes from fedos, is a Latin word which actually means agreement. So federation basically is that coming together of people to form a federation where there is an agreement between its constituent units. So for example, that's what happened in the United States. The United States had different states, right? And those states then came together. They agreed, they entered into an agreement and said, now we all come together and form this federation of which will be called United States. So it's United States. So all those states come together, they unite to form a United States of America by an agreement. Agreement basically, federation actually, to federate means to have an agreement between the states. And that's why United States is a federation, right? That's a literal meaning of the word federation. But the real meaning, that's a literal meaning, as I said. But the real meaning goes beyond that. And we will see why it is not limited to this. The real meaning is that whenever there are more than one levels of governance in any state or in any political entity, right? And if there is a clear division between or among those different levels, territorial levels of governance, then that structure is called federal structure, meaning having more than one level of governance. Territorial governments, right? This is the crux of it, and this is one element of it. Two, so there can be a country where there are no levels of governance, right? There is one central government and there is no other government. There are many other such examples. Japan is one, for example, right? Right? Italy is another. France. वहाँ पे state का concept नहीं है. They have administrative divisions. Districts है वहाँ पर. France has districts. डिस्ट्रिक्ट फ्रांस के डिस्ट्रिक्ट जो होते हैं उसमें प्रीफेक्ट नाम का एक एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव ऑफिसर होता है जो कलेक्टर जहाँ ऐसा होता है वैसे. बट दे आर पार्ट ऑफ दैट गवर्नेंस स्ट्रक्चर. दे आर नॉट सेपरेट एंटिटीज. उनका कोई अलग से पावर्स उनके पास नहीं आते. दे पावर्स फ्लो फ्रॉम दिस सेंट्रल एंटिटी. बट there are others such as United States or Canada or India where there are more than one level of governance and government. This is one feature. The other feature is clear and written division of powers between or among such states or whatever you call it, state, provinces, units. Okay? So these are the two features that make a polity a federal polity, a state a federal state. Now, do you see that both of these exist in case of India? Right? So there are more than one level. There is a union level and there are states, right? So which means there are two different levels of governance, right? Of course, now we have local governing bodies also in local governance, but they do not strictly fall in that definition, right? But they can also be taken like that. And the most important feature is the clear and written division of powers, right? And such division of power Whether now this is enough to constitute a federation. These two things are enough to make a structure a federal structure. But there can be a weak federal structure and a strong federal structure, right? India has a very strong federal structure. Why? India has a strong federal structure, not weak. Some people think that India is because India has some unitary features, India is a weak federation. No, it is not. Simply because India has strong federal structure, because these powers are given in the constitution itself. Because what? Because division of power is given in constitution. Okay? It is not this union government that is giving powers to the states. If that was the case, it would still be a federation, but a very weak federation. कि पार्लियामेंट एक लॉ बनाए और वो कहे कि फिर as per this law, these are the matters which will be legislated upon by state legislature. Then that is federal structure, but a very weak federal structure because the powers of the state are actually flowing through or flowing from parliament. This is not the case in India. In fact, parliament, which is at the union level, and the state legislatures at the state level derive their power from one common source, that is constitution. And that makes it so they cannot change. Suddenly they cannot one day say, okay, हम आपके पूरे अधिकार ले लेते हैं. ऐसा नहीं हो सकता, right? So this is what makes it a very strong federal polity. There are other features of federalism. Let's talk about them. Very few, which you know, but we will not talk about that unless it makes clarity. What are that important federal feature that makes India a very strong federation? What is it? Now you have already studied it, you have covered it, so it should come from you. So other than these, we covered that there are states and there are clear division of power. Other than this, very, very important thing is, there are a few, but to begin with, our constitution is a written constitution. Yeah, that's an explanation. But what is that feature that makes it very? It is a written constitution, and written constitution, when there is a written constitution and that constitution divides powers, then it becomes a very strong federal structure. So because written constitution is not easy to change, right? And in fact, the other feature is the rigidity of the constitution. Rigid constitution. Indian constitution is not very flexible, right? It can be amended, but it is not flexible. There is a say when it comes to certain matters which affect the balance of power between the state and the union. Then such features of the constitution can only be changed or amended with the ratification by the states, right? So states are involved, and of course there is a council of states. So another important federal feature is bicameral legislature at the center, meaning parliament is a bicameral. You getting it? Council of state is a very strong feature of a federal structure because they are representing the states there, right? Then independence of judiciary, because judiciary is there to keep a kind of a check, in a way, by way of judicial review, by way of interpretation of the constitutional provisions. Judiciary is actually there to ensure that such separation remains, right? No, it is not. Independence of judiciary is a strong federal feature. Integrated judiciary being integrated is a unitary feature, right? Not independence of judiciary, because there is always a tendency to accumulate and appropriate more and more power towards the center, and independent judiciary can actually keep a check on that, because that structurally the provisions of the constitutions have to be interpreted in a way that the federation and the balance of power and functions between the union and the state remains as per the mandate of the constitution. In fact, independent judiciary का एक example अच्छा है, because in Bommai case, yeah, the Supreme Court actually said that federalism is a basic structure of the constitution. Which means now if there is an amendment which somehow attacks any of these federal characteristics of the constitution, that now by the Supreme Court being considered as the basic feature, such amendments will be ultra vires, the Supreme Court will declare them ultra vires. But if the judiciary is not independent, then the center may always force them. So independent judiciary is a federal feature, right? Huh? Not integrity. Integrated means having just one judicial system from the top to the lowest level. That is a unitary feature that binds you with the union, right? So these are some of the very, very important unitary federal features, right? But then there are unitary features also, right? Which are, you can always go through and read. Which are those unitary features? So we have listed some of these. This is the most important one, right? Having division, first of all having two levels of government, right? This is generally called dual polity. This is a division of powers. Then you have this given in the constitution itself, and your constitution is written constitution, and it is fairly rigid when it comes to changing the provision of the constitution which relate to union state relations, right? And of course there is this. So just there can be different. Generally this is a very favorite topic with examiners in mains. Okay, time and again they ask questions from different angles. Any questions? Okay, so your mic is yeah, okay. Then there are some unitary features also which we know. Now list those features. We'll not discuss them because we already talked about them in great length. What are those unitary features? Emergency, of course we can list them in any other order, but emergency provisions are okay. Let us not go by the sequence. So whenever you do write an answer, you can't start writing. If there is a discuss the unitary features of the Indian Constitution, 250 words, 15 marks. How will you start writing answer? You'll not start with emergency, right? So there has, but if the moment you start with emergency and you cover other points, you're likely to lose marks, because the examiner will be looking for some kind of flow, some kind of logic, and some kind of organization in your answer. Though you listed, वो बोलेंगे डिस्कस आपने 5 पॉइंट डिस्कस कर लिया, 15 मार्क्स के क्वेश्चन में 5, 6, 7 पॉइंट लिख देना काफी है, ठीक है, एक्सप्लेन करते हुए. बट उसको आप किस ऑर्डर में लिखते हो, दैट विल डिसाइड योर मार्क्स और द डिफरेंस ऑफ मार्क्स. सो इसलिए how do you go? We can list them, but they try to have some sense. I'm just listing them, but what are those features? Emergency provisions, yes, right? Come on, list fast. Single citizenship, right? What else? emergency provisions actually draw powers to the union, right? Legislative powers and also financial powers, administrative powers, they all come, and we have seen that in detail kaise hota hai. Single citizenship, states do not have their citizenship, right? What else? So you have to just keep listing. Center has more powers means, in fact अभी अभी तो आपने बताया integrated judiciary is also one of the, so many features are integrated judiciary, right? What else? Why should you have to think so much about unitary features?
One constitution.
Okay, single constitution, correct. States don't have their own constitutions, unlike USA. In US, all the states have their own constitutions, and most of those constitutions are much bigger than the US constitution, because the US constitution is very small. More features, they should come from you. I hope you are not looking at the books and try and recollect, because that's what you will have to do in the exam. Huh? गवर्नर का इंस्टीट्यूशन ही अपने आप में बहुत बड़ा यूनिटरी फैक्टर है. ऑल इंडिया सर्विसेज ये भी है, और बोलते जाइए. What finance? No, emergency तो आ गया. So you are been able to 6, right? So prepare more of these. Go through the book. Try to remember. हाँ? नहीं, इलेक्शन कमीशन को भी आप लिस्ट कर सकते हैं. There's one election commission that conducts election, right? You can list them. You should try and list these, and in the order of their significance. You know, when I say what organization of your answer is an important element, what does that mean? It simply means that there has to be certain logic in it. मतलब आप जैसे आप ऑल इंडिया सर्विस को तो स्टार्ट नहीं करोगे क्योंकि आपके दिमाग में वो पहले आ गया, या फिर इलेक्शन कमीशन से नहीं स्टार्ट करोगे, राइट? You start something like single constitution, for example, right? Single citizenship, एक ही citizenship binds it together. इसी में करना है. Then emergency provisions, then integrated judiciary, governor, then may you come to all India services, then perhaps you'll come to election commission. So it's about organizing your answers, right? नहीं, वो तो आप लिख सकते हो, you know, जैसे वो पहले आया था, वो कह सकते हो as per the legislative matters are more with center, more with union, है ना? यूनियन के पास ज्यादा है, वो भी आप कह सकते हो पावर्स. आप कह सकते हो कि लेजिस्लेटिव पावर्स, रेसिड्यूअरी पावर्स जो है, they are with residual power with union. This is another unitary feature, right? They have the power and the legislative powers to make laws on concurrent subjects, and then in case of inconsistency, the parliament law will prevail. You know, such features you can list. We're not, it is there in your book and we have already read about it. There's nothing much to explain, but you know every single concept. Now you have to remember. When there is a question, you should be able to remember 7-8 points clearly. Okay? तो गवर्नर के इंस्टीट्यूशन में आ गया वो, right? So if there is a question on federalism, unitary feature, and it is generally asked from different perspectives. गवर्नर के थ्रू बहुत सारी चीजें कंट्रोल होती हैं, राइट? तो आपको हर एक पॉइंट को, जब आप इतना पॉइंट आपने लिख दिया यूनिटरी फीचर्स में, तो हो गया. यू जस्ट हैव टू properly explain. Is there any concept here that you don't know? How does it make unitary, right? We have talked about emergency, integrated judiciary, single citizenship, single constitution. All India service we have not talked about, but you are aware of it. These features we have talked about, but we are going to talk about little more because they are very, very important. Okay. So what are we going to talk about in detail is कभी कभी क्वेश्चन इस तरह से आता है कि यूनियन और स्टेट के बीच का लेजिस्लेटिव रिलेशनशिप पे क्वेश्चन आए. Then in that case we will have to have little more information to be able to write. Union state legislative relationship. So let us first understand what kind of relationships are there between the two. So there can be, first there can be lawmaking. Three kinds of areas will be there. First will be legislative relationships. Okay. Second will be there can be administrative relationships. Administrative. There can be financial. No, judiciary में नहीं आएगा. Financial relationship, right? So administration को आप executive भी बोल सकते हैं. These three types of relationships are there, and these three types of relationships are actually given in the Constitution, right? They are mentioned in the Constitution, and they are explained in detail. And we will try and see legislative today. Administrative, we will talk about that briefly. Okay? So, if you go to part 11 of the Constitution. So basically, legislative relationships are defined in part 11. This day they are asking parts. Okay, so remember parts. It is not very difficult. Part 11 में क्या दिया है? Relationship दी हुई है, right? So we will talk about relationship, legislative relationship. मतलब लॉ मेकिंग, लेजिस्लेटिव का मतलब क्या होता है? लेजिस्लेटिव मतलब लॉ मेकिंग के मामले में कौन कानून, कैसा कानून बनाएगा, कैसे बना सकते हैं, कौन बना सकता है, वो लेजिस्लेटिव रिलेशंस उस पर डिसाइड करते हैं, राइट? वी विल गो आर्टिकल बाय आर्टिकल, ट्राई एंड कवर मोस्ट ऑफ देम. ठीक है. सो दिस फर्स्ट वन इज आर्टिकल 245 which talks about the most fundamental things about it. क्या कहता है? पहला क्या कहता है ये? That the parliament can make laws for the entire territory. So let's first understand that legislative powers will have two aspects to it. दो main aspects है legislative powers के. एक aspect है territory, मतलब territorial power. To what extent, which area will your power extend to? The other is the matter, subject matter of the law making. मतलब क्या है? क्या कह रहे हैं हम कि जो भी आप कानून बनाएंगे, कानून बनाने की जो शक्ति है उसके दो एस्पेक्ट्स है. मेन, आप कौन से एरिया के लिए, कितने एरिया के लिए कानून बना सकते हैं और किस विषय पे बना सकते हैं, राइट? देयर आर टू मेन एस्पेक्ट्स. So you're not supposed to read now. Don't read now. If you read now, you will miss certain important things which I mentioned, right? That reading you have to go back and do. Okay? Just try to understand, because that you can always read anytime. So दो तरह के aspects cover करना है हमेशा. क्या? कौन से एरिया में, कितने एरिया में कौन कर सकता है और सब्जेक्ट मैटर कौन सा है. And that is given in under Article 245. So first thing it says is that the parliament, it talks about parliament. Parliament means union wala legislature hai. And state legislature, we can say legislature at the state level. ऐसा भी कर सकते. Parliament can make laws. territory first. Territorially for what? Entire Indian territory. Entire Indian territory. Simple है, बहुत logical है. So parliament का jurisdiction क्या हुआ? Make laws for what? Entire Indian territory. Territory, right? Territory includes all the land, right? All the waters, right? That's the territory. Land including waters. Huh? Waters of Indian territory. It extends the jurisdiction of India extends into waters, right? It is slightly different in different regions, but generally it extends to a few hundred kilometers from your waters, unless there is another country close by. Okay, तो ये waters भी इसमें territory में included है. And so make laws, subject matters में the subject matters given in subjects given in union list, right? तो इस तरह का jurisdiction इसका है. Then it says that state legislature can make laws और लेकिन उनके कानून बनाने का दायरा क्या होगा? ओनली दैट स्टेट. ठीक है, वो उस स्टेट के बाहर के लिए नहीं बना सकते. किसी स्टेट से लगा हुआ कोई वाटर्स है उसमें बना सकते हैं क्या? नहीं बना सकते. वाटर्स में तो यूनियन गवर्नमेंट ही बनाएगी, भले ही वो किसी स्टेट की बाउंड्री लगती हो. ओके, that's why we're not talking about Indian territory here. The boundaries are within the boundaries of the state. And कौन से सब्जेक्ट पे बना सकती है? स्टेट लिस्ट पे, right? But it also says one more thing. It says that parliament and state legislatures can make laws. Both of them have a kind of, you may coexistential power when it comes to another list which is called concurrent list. Okay. So let us go article wise so that you also remember the article. Parliament, now this is what it says, right? Another important thing about the powers of the parliament is that, of course, it can make acts on this, laws on this territory, but they also have an additional power to make laws for extraterritorial operation. This is something only the parliament can do. Parliament can make laws for extraterritorial operation. Means आपकी जो टेरिटरी है कंट्री की, उसके बाहर यदि लागू करने के लिए कोई कानून बनाना है तो केवल पार्लियामेंट बना सकती है, राइट? स्टेट गवर्नमेंट ऐसा कोई कानून नहीं बना सकती जो उसके बाहर ऑपरेट हो. Can you give examples of such? No. There are many laws which are applicable to Indian citizens wherever they are, to the Indian citizens and to the property of India. ये कहाँ ऑपरेट